All right, hour number 2 here on a Tuesday, and that can mean only one thing. ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky joins us. His appearances on One Bills Live are presented by Caesars Sportsbook, an official mobile sports betting partner of the Buffalo Bills. All right, Dan, the Bills are coming off the bye here. Already had a practice on Monday, and to no one's surprise, pounding the fundamentals. Tackling has been an issue on defense, as you well know. You saw it firsthand in the Monday night game against the Falcons a couple of weeks back. They're 26th in first down defense. They're giving up over 6 yards a play on first down alone on defense. So takeaways aren't coming nearly as frequently as they did last year or even the year before. They do not have a game yet in which they have more than one takeaway. So I guess the question I want to pose to you defensively, what is something that can easily be changed for the better going forward in terms of that defensive performance?
Well, I think, Chris, the answer obviously is health. Having your best players healthy goes a long way in this league, right? That's so much more impactful and important than schematics. I think we are just about halfway through the season in the NFL right now. And, take it from me, who, because of the job, I watch every single snap in the whole league. And I would tell you the teams that are playing well defensively, it's a very simple thing that they are, one, getting off blocks, and then two, tackling very well in space, both individually and population to the football. And so, that's something that I would tell you a couple years ago was probably not as prevalent with really good defenses. It is right now. And if you can't do that, you're going to struggle just because of the style of offenses that are getting played right now. And so I think the healthier they can get, the better. Two, the defensive line is not getting off blocks, right? And so I think, just from an offensive perspective, if I was playing against a defense that was struggling getting off blocks, we're just constantly trying to create double teams on you to push, to change the line of scrimmage. And then what I would expect would be for you defensively to do one of two things. You'd either bring more people to the football, so drop people down, and play a more single high safety, or you'd have to get into run stunts where you're stunting and moving those defensive linemen to try to create angles for them. And so I think those are two things that are worthy of having the conversation about, with Buffalo's defenses. Are they willing to play a little bit more of a loaded box against certain teams, right? And having people closer to the football, or are they willing to move the defensive line a little bit more and have run stunts? I think a lot of teams are going to the latter. A lot of teams are going to more and more run stunts where they're trying to move defensive linemen after snap and flow linebackers over the football. And so I would say that is probably the thing that, at least in when it comes to the specifics of defending the run a little bit better on early downs and tackling better in space, that I think health, but also just how do they want to try and schematically change some things up?
I know everything looks a little bit more cloudy when you're coming off a two-game losing streak like the Bills have done. Have you noticed anything about their offense, particularly Josh or anybody else, that is a lot different than what you have seen in the past?
Um, so I would say this, and everyone knows how highly I think of Joe Brady. I do think that Joe has, at times, specifically in the last 2 weeks, kind of lost sight of the identity that he created for this football team. And I'll go back to a little bit of that Atlanta game, and just, it's a very clear understanding when you're playing a defense that's built on speed and pass rush, you don't let them play fast and pass rush. And they didn't really do that. And so the drop back game and the at the line of scrimmage pass game was taken away. And instead of turning around and handing the ball to James Cook and allowing that offensive line just to dominate the line of scrimmage, it got, kind of too cute, or you thought you could outthink or out scheme the speed. And so I think getting back to the true nature of when he took over and what the clear objective was going to be, big deal. And I'd also say that I've talked about, Keon's got to take a step forward. He just has to. And if Keon's not going to be a guy that is going to go whip people on routes, I'd like to see them get Keon going laterally a little bit more, candidly. We know he's got a big frame and he can win some of those jump balls, but I'd like to see him get laterally on some schemes and maybe get the ball in his hands a little bit more often in the pass concept. Um, Shakir's got to touch it a little bit earlier on in their pass game. Obviously, Kincaid coming back is healthy, but as much as I think their pass game is really cool, if I would be floored if they did not come out and give James Cook 8 to 10 touches in that first quarter.
By the same token, this matchup is looking a lot like the one the Buffalo run game had a couple of weeks ago against
Yep.
New England. A really good run front, strength on strength, and that's kind of what Carolina is. They haven't given up more than 80 yards rushing, I think, the last 3 weeks. So, or in their last 3 games. So what do you see there that the Bills are going to have to contend with? Derek Brown is an obvious thing that sticks out like a sore thumb, but what do they have to contend with there with respect to Carolina's run front?
Yeah, so I think the two things in Carolina's run game that stand out are Buffalo is going to see more abnormal defensive line movement than they have all season long. Carolina does a lot of kind of um, abnormal, unique defensive line movements. Like when I was talking about run stunts, everybody in the league just moves at once, right? Like we all slant. They'll almost do like run games. In the pass game, we often see like two defensive tackles kind of make that X type of motion or
Right.
scissors motion and picky. They do that in their run game. And so, that creates just a lot of chaos. And so from an offensive perspective, if you're Buffalo, it's like what scheme, number one, do you feel can handle that initially? That's their duo game, right? You just want to get those double teams going and try to dent the line of scrimmage. And then there's moments when you try to kill it. Like there's the moments when you try to take advantage of it, because the reality is if two guys are stunting or whatnot and you pin one, then the gap is going to be huge. And so trying to take advantage of that, it's a little bit Kansas City style as well. A couple years ago, Buffalo has had success in that regard, but it's a very chaotic, very movement-based defensive line that just tries to create on early downs violence and disruption. I think the second thing attached to this defense, Chris, is it's a really good man coverage unit. J.C. Horn's one of the best corners in football.
Yep.
Michael Jackson playing opposite him is playing big, physical, hands-on, pretty aggressive man coverage. And so, for a team in Carolina that's had this resurgence, I got to move. Has had this resurgence. It's way more about. There we go. It's way more about, or partly because how good their defense has been and how active it's been.
All right, let's get back. Let's get a little more specific here. We got a game coming up against Carolina, and you, being a former quarterback, Andy Dalton may get the start over Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Bryce got a high ankle. It might be a little gamesmanship, but it looks like we're going to see Andy Dalton at the helm. What does that mean for Carolina, their offense? How much will they change? Now, with him taking all the reps during the week, gives him a chance to get in. He's a wily veteran. He's done this before. How much do they change their offense for Andy Dalton?
Yeah, I really don't think, Steve, they'll change it schematically much. This is a really good offensive line. It's a big, mauling offensive line. They play with multiple tight ends. They got receivers that are willing to block. They like their gap scheme runs, meaning, trying to pin people down and pull people around. So schematically, I don't think it changes that much. They got a really nice perimeter player in Jimmy Horn that they try to get the football to. Jimmy Horn's, he's not Khalil Shakir, but they use him in that type of mindset. Like, how many different ways can we just get him the ball in space? The young receiver they drafted out of Arizona, Ted McMillan's awesome. I mean, he's outstanding with his feel and space, and he's got great hands, and he goes and tracks the football really well. And Leggett is another big body receiver. The biggest difference is this. Bryce has been really good at extending plays, keeping plays alive, and he's been deadly at it in the red zone. And I think he's got 4 or 5 touchdowns this year doing just that, where, he's able to hang on to the football for a little bit in that gotta have it situation or that red zone spacing. And, his kind of suddenness and athleticism has led to touchdowns and not field goals. And so that's probably the biggest thing. This offensive line has not been a great pass protecting line in Carolina, but he's covered up for a lot of it. And so, if that could be an advantage for Buffalo, not having to deal with the creativity of Bryce Young, it's a pass rush or a pass protection unit that hasn't been great.
Okay. And then just looking at Buffalo's offense, I know you said you're expecting, a lot of Cook work early. We've had callers and fans wondering why Cook isn't a bigger part of the passing game. He's got 12 catches on the season for 89 yards, and I think everybody realizes he's not the designated third down back. That's Ty Johnson.
Yeah.
But is there a place in your mind for a player of that caliber to maybe be on the field also on third down if he's not the primary pass protector in the backfield?
Yeah, my initial answer is I'd ask every Buffalo Bills fan to give me the three best players on their offense, right? And
Yeah.
he would be in that grouping. And so you want those three players to touch the football as many times as they can within the game. It's always kind of game plan centric as well. If you're playing a team that has relatively exotic pressures and communications at the forefront by the back and his ability to kind of see the defense and the blitz distribute and the ability and the patience and the way that he works with the offensive line to pick up that pressure, you want that guy on the field. So if Ty Johnson's better at that, and my guess in the tape says he is, if it's a defense that you're going to be seeing that stuff against, then the protection is the starting point. But I do think that there's moments and opportunities where, listen, I'm not telling everybody that James Cook is, a Bijan Robinson or a Christian McCaffrey, but I think he can be accessed in similar ways. I think that his ability to not only run the football but be utilized in a space game, a pass catching game, a ball to the perimeter game, a screen game, I do think is something that I would expect to have a little bit more of an uptick just because, if you're creating space, you're creating space for your best players. He certainly is one of them. So maybe it's not third down, Chris. Maybe there's opportunities to get him in the pass game involved on first and or second down rather than 3rd and 8, and you got to be elite at pass protection.
How much pressure do the Carolina Panthers generate, both with extra guys on the blitz or with their front four?
Yeah, it's more extra guys in those past situations. Their defensive coordinator, Ejiro Evero, is a big, like, I'm trying to create one-on-ones because they got talented pass rushers. They got a young kid out of South Carolina, Scorton, who's a really good one-on-one pass rusher as well. And so they're just trying to create one-on-ones and they trust their coverage unit. That's the big thing. JC Horn's elite man coverage corner, elite, and so that will be a matchup to pay attention to is who is he following, how is that matchup going, but it's not this overwhelming like 4 guys off a side pressure. It's more one-on-one pick game, one-on-one pick game, one-on-one win, one-on-one overload. And so if they're in obvious passing situations, they'll be across the board Buffalo stressed one-on-ones.
Dan, thanks as always. We appreciate the time. We'll catch up with you next week. See you on Tuesday.
Thanks, guys.